My name is Josh Thurston. I'm with AWS, and I will be the moderator for today's webcast. All right, so today's featured speakers are Sunil Yu. Sunil is the creator of the Cyber Defense Matrix. Myself, I'm Josh Thurston, as I mentioned. I'm a senior category lead here at security in the security team for AWS Marketplace. And I've also got Sagar Kaznis, and he is a partner solutions architect here at AWS as well. If during the webcast you have any questions for any of the presenters, please enter them into the questions window located in the Go to Webinar interface. We'll answer questions in the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We have some really good content for you today. To start things off, Sunil will be talking about sensitive assets and how to prioritize protecting them with capabilities found in two products, Cloud Workload Protection Platforms and Cloud Security Posture Management Solutions. After Sunil, I will go and show you how to operationalize some of his advice with relevant solutions available in AWS Marketplace. And then Sagar will share some real-world scenarios of customers leveraging the solutions and how that ties into protecting sensitive assets in AWS. So without further ado, I'm going to pass everything over to Sunil. And Sunil, show is yours.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to share about how we can prioritize controls and better manage the security posture of our pets and cattle in the cloud. But before I jump into that, I need to give some quick context. So AWS has brought forth a fundamentally different model for how we build, operate, and secure IT infrastructure and applications. There are three key aspects that make the cloud radically different. First is that everything can be defined programmatically, so it's highly configurable. Moreover, the infrastructure itself is configurable by the developers who are actually deploying the applications. Second, we have a wide array of discrete services that can be mixed and matched. And then third, the consolidated environments can simplify management and give us economies of scale. We now have this unified API for everything. Before we had to deal with multiple APIs from multiple vendors, but now we have the single API that we can use to build this environment. However, these qualities also have security implications. I mean, it's great that everything is programmatically configurable, but it also creates room for configuration errors. Because everything is so highly configurable, we are certainly going to be prone to configuration errors. And the developers who configure these things don't always have guardrails or guidance on how to configure them securely. As of this year, AWS offers us around 175 different services, but this can lead to cloud sprawl with many individual resources that need to be tracked. These include microservices, containers, serverless Lambda functions, and this is all on top of all the traditional servers, networks, and databases that we have to deal with. And then lastly, with everything being in the same logical location and accessible via an API that is exposed to the internet, we can't strictly rely on network-centric boundaries anymore. We need identity-driven boundaries versus strictly a network-centric one. So whether we're trying to ensure that you have the right configuration throughout your environment, or you keep losing track of what resources you have, or you have trouble managing secrets and struggling with identity and access management, well, these are all issues that we wrestle with, whether we operate in the cloud or on-prem. But fortunately, AWS gives us a new way to tackle these security needs for cloud-based resources. And that's what we're going to cover in today's webinar. So in the previous slide, we talked about these three implications. And it's a good reminder that Gartner gives us, which is that nearly all successful attacks on cloud services are the result of customer misconfiguration, mismanagement, and mistakes. Now, let's take this configuration problem and make it harder by now having tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of individual resources that need to be tracked and properly configured. With so many different services, each with their distinct setup, can we be certain that the people who set up those services did it properly? And then lastly, let's take all that and put it into an environment where everything is commingled. And you can see how an incorrect misconfiguration needs to be found quickly and addressed quickly. So the issue here is one of scale. The flexibility and scale that we have in AWS also means that we can make mistakes at scale too. And so we need tools and processes to prevent misconfigurations and vulnerabilities from the beginning as things are being built. We need to provide extensive visibility into our running cloud environment. And then we need to analyze that visibility to find misconfigurations and vulnerabilities in production and be able to fix and patch them before they're exploited. So we need a new approach that adapts to this new operating model, which includes a fundamental difference in that the security team is no longer solely doing the work to secure things. The other teams are also responsible for it because we've given the power to developers and engineers to set all this up without necessarily understanding how to do it securely. So what can give us a grip on cloud security? Well, there are several native capabilities in AWS that provide the foundational tools to secure our workloads in the cloud. If you have a team that understands how to thoroughly leverage these native capabilities, then you can build it yourself. However, if you're resource constrained on time or people, well, we can also leverage AWS Marketplace independent software vendors that can also provide ready-to-use solutions to tackle these security needs. Now, there are two primary classes of cloud security tools that provide protective capabilities for cloud service providers such as AWS. As defined by Gartner, these include capabilities such as Cloud Security Posture Management, or CSPM, and Cloud Workload Protection Platforms, or CWPP. A lot of the marketplace tools basically leverage the AWS native tools and ensure that everything is set up properly and is compliant with best practices. Now, to understand the differences between CSPM and CWPP, and to organize all the things that you see here, it's helpful to look at frameworks to understand how they relate to each other. And the Cyber Defense Matrix is one such framework that can help us understand the differences and ensure that we understand what a complete set of cloud security capabilities are, and to be able to prioritize them according to our business needs. And so I originally created the Cyber Defense Matrix to organize cybersecurity vendors, and it has served to be very practical for many use cases. At the basic level, the Cyber Defense Matrix is an adaptation of the NIST cybersecurity framework, but with an added dimension that captures various classes of assets that we care about. And these assets are devices, applications, networks, data, and users. This added dimension will help us improve our ability to find and fill gaps in our understanding of completeness when it comes to cloud security. So using the Cyber Defense Matrix, we can rationalize all the capabilities that we saw previously by organizing them into the Cyber Defense Matrix and understanding and ensuring that we have covered all our bases. So for this webinar, we'll focus primarily, though, on the left side of boom for the Cyber Defense Matrix. Boom is the point between protect and detect where some event occurs. And what we want to do is look at the range of cloud security solutions that allow us to avoid a boom scenario at all. The Cyber Defense Matrix provides a systematic approach for evaluating various areas of concern and considering various controls that help us mitigate any vulnerabilities associated with the assets that we have. The types of assets listed on the left of the matrix are generically defined, but these classes of assets are represented in cloud environments with slightly different labels. So, for example, in AWS in particular, the assets that we're dealing with would be labeled with terms such as EC2 instances for devices or S3 buckets for data. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are two major classes of cloud security capabilities as defined by Gartner. They are the Cloud Workload Protection Platforms, or CWPP, or Cloud Security Posture Management, or CSPM. And Gartner shows them as being adjacent capabilities, one focused on the control plane, or the underlying infrastructure, and the other on the data plane, or the workload itself. And bridging between them are a set of security services, and customers can leverage AWS native capabilities or leverage marketplace vendors with similar capabilities. Now, if I flip this diagram around, it actually maps nicely to the Cyber Defense Matrix. Each asset class in the Cyber Defense Matrix represents one of the assets that need to be addressed in cloud environments. While there may be overlapping features, CSPM and CWPP generally address different types of assets as shown here. Specifically, CSPM typically secures the configuration of the underlying infrastructure, such as S3 buckets, which would be data, IAM roles, which would be under users, and then network security groups, which is under networks. CWPP typically secures the operating system, which falls in under devices. And then both CSPM and CWPP provide coverage of different parts of the application space. So CSPM covers platform as a service like Lambda functions, whereas CWPP covers containers. And again, both of those are aligned in the application domain. To show how that plays out with, let's say, a particular vendor in the marketplace, here's an example with Trend Micro's Cloud One offering. Now, Cloud One is made up of 6 distinct parts, but we can see how they're effectively working together to fill out the various boxes shown in the cyber defense matrix. Now, in some cases, Trend will partner with other vendors. For example, their application security component covers serverless, but they're actually integrating with SNCC to provide a more in-depth application security capabilities. In other cases, it's slightly nuanced. So, for example, their file storage security, it's actually securing. What it's doing is it's actually scanning the storage for malware, essentially running antivirus on the S3 buckets. It's not actually securing the file storage, but that's what their cloud conformity product does. For this type of analysis, we can see where there may be areas that we also need to potentially cover. So, for example, in the asset class of data, well, I include databases here, but most CSPM tools that I've seen only ensure that storage is secure and don't provide much support in securing databases. But you can find other capabilities for that in the marketplace. Now, this is nice, but we may want to see a more granular set of sub-functions that occur in each of these asset classes. So let's double-click on this and dive a little deeper. So this is a table transposed from the previous view of the cyber defense matrix. We have the asset classes on the top and the sub-functions on the left. Within the function of identify, we have other sub-functions like inventory, classification, and vulnerability assessment. Likewise, under protect, there are several activities that we perform, for which I'm only showing a small subset. This table provides essentially a more descriptive view of the activities that occur within each asset class. And we can see that many of these sub-functions like vulnerability assessment or logging can be essentially applied to each of these asset classes, but they may go under slightly different names. So, for example, if you're looking for vulnerabilities in devices, well, that would basically be an operating system scan. Whereas looking for vulnerabilities in storage would be like looking for open buckets or exposed keys. In some cases, like classification, well, I lack the words to kind of properly describe what classification looks like for networks or applications, but we can see capabilities like data classification and we see how that could be applied not just for typical sensitive information, but also malicious information like malware and viruses. Now, using this construct, we can map AWS native services. So, for example, let me see if I can move my mouse. So we can see, for example, Amazon Macy would fall under data classification in this particular box here, whereas CloudWatch, for example, would generally support logging for devices, apps, and CloudTrail would generally support logging for networks, storage, and IAM roles. We can also map AWS vendors at this level too, and we can see more specifically what capabilities they can address. I mentioned earlier how Trend Micro finds malware on storage objects like S3 buckets. So we can look at their file storage security capability as falling in under data classification, and specifically classification of viruses and malware. And we'll find other complementary capabilities here too. So let's say in data classification again, we'll find companies like Digital Guardian that will look at S3 buckets and classify the content there as PII, PHI, or PCI. Other capabilities of Trend Micro may focus on other things like exploit mitigation, whether it's memory protection or WAF or network intrusion prevention. So you would align those their product under those each of those different buckets as an example. And then we'll find specialization where some vendor, like let's say like Check Point, whose strength is in the network domain, will have a full set of full suite of controls to be able to offer in the space of network. Now, there's a bit of overlap in some of these, but it's just to give you an idea of how to take a given capability and align it to see where it fits. So hopefully folks can see how the asset dimension of the cyber defense matrix can be useful for gaining an understanding of various aspects of cloud security. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that you have to implement everything that's here, but it's useful to know that there is something that could be done in each of these boxes. You can kind of sort of see this as a checklist. But which of these should you do first? How do you prioritize these? Well, at one level, you can prioritize these controls by looking at this as an ordered list, where you generally want to do the things at the top before you move to things towards the bottom. So, for example, there's no point in doing a vulnerability assessment if you don't even know what you have yet. So doing an inventory would be higher priority than, let's say, a vulnerability assessment. But there's also another approach that deals with the inherent nature of the asset itself. And this may be an even more important factor in terms of how you prioritize your controls. Now, at the beginning of this webinar, you may remember I referenced how we can manage the security of our pets and cattle in the cloud. The notion of pets and cattle was popularized by a guy named Randy Bias, and it's gained adoption in the cloud native world. But let's make sure that we understand what pets and cattle are. So pets are things that we give names to that we can remember and pronounce. And when it gets sick, we take it to the vet and we like giving it hugs. Pets are like our personal laptops or that server under your desk or your social security number. Cattle, on the other hand, are branded with an obscure string of letters and numbers which you can't even pronounce, and frankly, you don't really care to remember. And when you get sick, you cull it from the herd and you move on. Cattle are like containers and serverless functions and credit card numbers that change with every transaction. This understanding of pets and cattle is important because you absolutely need to prioritize protecting your pets. And the approach that we take for securing pets is very different than the approach that we take for securing cattle. Before AWS, we traditionally built pets. They're hard to manage. They take up a lot of time and resources. They get run over very often, and it requires lots of manpower to get them healthy again. And one of the reasons why I think cloud-native security capabilities like CWPP and CSPM are really great is because they actually help us reinforce the usage of design patterns that build infrastructure and applications like cattle instead of pets. Securing pets takes a lot of time and effort, but if you prioritize, that because you care a lot about your pets, right? But if you build systems to be more like cattle, we might find that securing them is substantially easier. Now, we will always have pets, and we can put our pets in the cloud, but we also want to make sure that we're protecting them accordingly. And so we need tools to be able to secure and treat them well. The types of tools that are available can be broken down into the traditional CIA Triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And there's a wide array of capabilities available within AWS native tools, but also in the AWS Marketplace to help us to do CIA for our pets. Later on, you'll see Sagar will show the range of the AWS native capabilities aligned against the NIST cybersecurity framework later in the webinar. But if we want to build cattle instead, we can operate with a different paradigm. And if I look at the attributes of cattle, I can distill them into a different triad. These attributes are distributed, immutable, and ephemeral. And these attributes confer security benefits, addressing some of the main challenges that we've had in security. But more interestingly, these attributes can actually counter the need for the CIA Triad. If something is distributed, why do I need to have any one asset be available? If something is immutable, then why do I need to worry about its integrity? And if something is highly ephemeral, then why do I need to worry about its integrity? About its confidentiality. And again, AWS offers cloud-native capabilities that allow us to build cattle-like designs. So CloudFront, for example, helps us ensure that we can deliver services in a highly distributed fashion. CloudFormation templates help us ensure that things are built exactly to specifications in a repeatable and immutable way. And then Lambda provides a way to build applications based on very short-lived and ephemeral functions. And there are many more native capabilities that AWS offers to help us build systems to be more like cattle. And here are some of them aligned against the DIE triad, where each of these different services that AWS provides aligns against some aspect of the DIE concept. And ideally, you want to pick those things that overlap as well. So things that are distributed and immutable, or distributed and ephemeral, or immutable and ephemeral, or ideally all three. But as I mentioned earlier, we will always have pets. We just want to have as few as possible so that our security obligations can be addressed with the very few cyber veterinarians that we also have. What I have found interesting is that the distribution of pets and cattle shifts in ways that aligns with the shared responsibility model. So if you're not familiar with this, AWS published this model to help customers understand that AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, but customers are responsible for security in the cloud. Since AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, the underlying components that make up the cloud can be seen as cattle by AWS customers. So compute, storage, database, networking, hardware, I mean, even whole regions and availability zones, at the macro level, they are all cattle. From the customer standpoint, they're essentially disposable, and they manifest the attributes of the CIA Triad. However, as we move up the part of the model where customers are now responsible for security, we're starting to see more pets. And our goal really should be able to keep them like cattle. And over time and with tools like CSPM and CWPP, we can start our journey towards higher levels of cloud-native maturity so that we end up with more cattle in the cloud. And for the pets that we do have in the cloud, that they're actually more secure. Over the long term, we should continue to make design decisions that aim to have our environment in the cloud be all cattle. I don't think we'll ever get there because, as I said earlier, I think we'll always have some pets. But such a goal helps us make better design choices when it comes to minimizing the burdens that we would otherwise face if we ended up with too many pets. And I think the proportion of pets that we find may reflect the maturity of an organization's adoption of the cloud, where fewer and fewer assets resemble pets and look more like cattle instead. And I think it's noteworthy that customer data sits at the top of this model. Customer data seems to resist being turned into cattle, but I don't think that will always forever be the case. There are a number of privacy-enhancing techniques, privacy-enhancing technologies, which ironically also has the acronym PET, but anyway, these privacy-enhancing technologies allow us to turn customer data from pets into cattle. These tools include things like differential privacy, homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation, trusted execution environments, federated learning. I mean, there's a whole bunch of new technologies that are emerging that really help us in this particular space. And I think that's the future of data security, making data more like cattle so that we don't even need to protect it at all, and we can instead let it DIE. But again, I want to reemphasize that we'll always still have pets somewhere. So the goal then is to minimize that number that we have to deal with. And so the design principle here is to be conscious of when you're creating a pet. What we want to be able to do is discourage or disincentivize pet creation. It should only be a cattle-like, we should only go towards a pet when a cattle-like design pattern is not available. Think of the contact tracing apps as an example. One of the key fundamental principles that folks are trying to adhere to is to make the customer data itself be more like cattle, and specifically as ephemeral as possible. And then laws like CCPA and GDPR serve as disincentives for creating more data pets. So naturally, we want to then head towards creating data cattle instead. We also want to encourage removal of pets when we can. Unfortunately, this is a very emotional decision for the business and for the owner. I mean, once you have a pet, you really kind of don't want to lose it. And so we want to encourage cattle creation, but we also want to disincentivize cattle from being turned into pets. Well, how does that happen? Well, if you make changes to that cattle, well, at that point, you're violating the principle of immutability. Or if you let it live longer than it needs to, you violate the principle of ephemerality. And so exercising stringent pet controls also includes making people aware when they're about to adopt a pet. And in the world of IT, I think we do this unknowingly and accidentally. But going forward, what we want to do is to make owners more aware when they're about to adopt a pet. We want to present them with some form of awareness that that something that they have that they're responsible for is turning into a pet. And before it becomes a full-fledged pet, they're given an option. the option is sign this adoption certificate where they have the promise to love, care for, attend to, and secure this pet for the rest of its life, okay? And we want owners to make wise decisions and understand their commitments before adopting new pets, because I think the future of security and what we prioritize may depend more on how well we exercise pet control than how well we secure them. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co-presenter, Josh.
Great. Thanks, Neil. I always like your unique insight and perspective to security, so thank you for the great info there. As you already know, I'm a category manager here in the AWS Marketplace, and I focus on the security catalog. And in my role over the past few months, I've been working closely with Sunil, and I'm working on an application that will put his cyber defense matrix into an interactive format that you'll eventually be able to use. And so today I'm going to demonstrate a little bit of that prototype for you. I've selected two scenarios that I think almost all AWS customers can relate to. And the first scenario is migration to AWS. So whether your organization is early in migration or you're well into that journey, I think you'll notice there's some requirements amongst many, but I've listed a couple. So from the security teams side of the organization, the security is going to have requirements such as visibility. They have to be able to see what is running in the cloud. They have to have authority to access them, the assets, and they have to have the capability. So those kind of stack on each other. So I got to see it, I got to have authority to access it, then I have to have capabilities, and capabilities might be pushing a security countermeasure or measuring compliance or even responding in a situation. And ideally, the requirement comes down to being compliant, as Sunil had talked about a number of times in his portion. Now, in addition to the security requirements, you have organizational requirements. And this is getting a lot back to the pets and cattle. So when you're looking at all of the different pets and cattle in the organization, you're looking at confidentiality, integrity, availability, etc. And the crux is, as you're in migration, you start to kind of see a blurred line if you're not well versed in this practice, and having tools that help you get through that process makes it a lot easier. So CSPM and CWPP will help facilitate that. In migration, they'll on launch, or the moment you migrate something and it goes live, you'll be able to inventory all of the cloud assets. You'll gain authority to access them via things like IAM roles, and then that will carry over into providing capability to protect the assets, to monitor them, and continuously measure compliance and risk of the assets. Now, the second scenario is development. In this, one of the attractive pieces about development, or one of the benefits of moving to the cloud, is the ability for DevOps teams to innovate with speed and agility. Procurement is easier, etc. So in that development scenario, same security requirements. Developers need to launch new instances or create containers, etc. But the security team still wants visibility, authority, capability, and compliance, because that asset is up and running. But on the DevOps side, there's different requirements. They want easy access, speed, and agility, and it really boils down to a more frictionless CI/CD pipeline. Again, The CSPM and CWPP will help facilitate that so that as developers have the ability to instantiate new instances and start development and access databases, etc., immediately inventory all of those assets, provide the security team and even the developers the authority to access via IAM roles, and the security team, even though these are development systems, you can see capabilities to protect, monitor, measure compliance, and that'll move from development into production. So here's a sneak peek at the app, and I just wanted to say traditionally we would do a live demo, but during the pandemic we're all presenting from home, so I chose to do some screenshots to avoid a technical difficulty here. But this is some of the walkthrough of what the application will look like. So you'll log in and or visit AWS Marketplace rather. We'll have featured vendors. You can scroll through, find the vendor that you're looking at. You can click into the vendor, or you can scroll down and we'll start populating out frameworks such as the Cyber Defense Matrix, and you can click directly into the framework and start exploring through a framework perspective, or a view rather. This is where I'm working to make this an interactive tool. Now, we see the CDM here, and at the moment I only have AWS products showing, but in a future state the CDM will be filled with all of the AWS Marketplace vendors, and it'll map the vendors and their product listings to their respective operational function or asset group, or actually both. And so when a user is shopping, the user can select a generic, or not a generic, a specific vendor in mind and see where that vendor maps out in the CDM. So to show that, we'll look at Trend Micro as our example vendor for today, and I'll dive in and show both a view of migration and the DevOps scenarios with their capabilities in the CDM. So here, if you reference back as Sunil was talking through the CDM, he talked about really the left of boom, the identify and the protect. So with Trend here, you can see that Trend offers multiple products, and they provide a lot of coverage across the CDM. And when we put these two scenarios in place, Trend provides a good amount of coverage for migration and DevOps. So starting with identify, Trend provides coverage for each of the asset types with exception of users in this case. And this of course shows multiple products from them, but one that sticks out as you really look at it is the Cloud One conformity appears to populate device, application, network, and data. And that applies both in the migration and the DevOps scenarios. So you'll have the ability to identify migrated instances and new instances within AWS from the moment the asset is launched. Now, as we move into the protect operational function, Trend provides coverage for each asset type here with exception of users and data. And that product selection changes slightly, and users can quickly see that there will be a need to add additional products from Trend in order to achieve protection. So we bring in Cloud One workload security, and we bring in deep security as two of the examples to provide that protection. Now, again, both in migration and the DevOps, you'll have the ability to protect migrated instances and new instances within AWS from the moment asset is launched. So going back to identify, you immediately identify and create like your inventory, and then you move immediately into protecting those assets. So this is again just a sneak peek. You'll see that Trend offers solutions across all of these, and you can even see that moving on kind of right of boom, they've got a solution in the detect device category. But using this application, the intention is to help identify where you can pivot amongst vendors and include or rather cover gaps and achieve full coverage with as few vendors as you need. And your result is less spend, but maximizing security coverage for any scenario that you can think of. And as this develops out, we'll have all the vendors baked in, and you can leverage this to see where your coverage is and where you need to go. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sagar, and he'll give you some real-world scenarios here.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. I'm definitely looking forward to utilizing that tool when it becomes available. And as for me, my name is Sagar Khasnas, and I'm a partner solutions architect for AWS Marketplace. Now, prior to this, I was a technology consultant and a solution architect for many years. And now I primarily work with AWS customers who are asking how they can run their cloud operations in the most effective way possible. And really, based on these interactions, I'd like to spend some time talking about how you can protect your sensitive assets in AWS. So today, we'll be going over a few AWS services that Josh and Sunil mentioned. We'll look at a few examples of available seller solutions in AWS Marketplace. And finally, we'll talk through a few use cases that we've picked from a few customer success stories so that you can start to learn and then implement these in your own environment. Now, similar to how Sunil used the cyber defense matrix to categorize protection-based services, we've also categorized a number of AWS services that can enable sensitive asset protection. And today, we'll look at a few of these closely, namely the AWS Key Management Service, which we also call as KMS, and Cloud HSM, which is nothing but a hardware security module service, along with AWS Security Hub, and then one of our newer services, Amazon Macie. Now, when you look at AWS Key Management Service or KMS, it's a fully managed service that you can leverage to create and manage your cryptographic keys that would control access to your AWS services as well as applications. Now, this service will allow you to create a central control point to define policies and manage permissions to help ensure all of the security within your AWS environment and resources is maintained with these keys and permissions. And if you have strong regulatory requirements, we also have AWS Cloud HSM, which is essentially a cloud-based hardware security module that will help you manage your encryption keys using FIPS 140-2 level 3 validated HSMs. This will really allow you to export all of your keys to other hardware security modules while automating all of your time-consuming tasks, such as hardware provisioning, software patching, high availability setup, as well as backups. Now, you can also combine Cloud HSM along with AWS KMS to make sure you can enable encryption of your data while maintaining control of hardware security modules that would protect your master keys stored in AWS KMS. Now, one more service I want to talk to you about is AWS Security Hub. Now, with Security Hub, you can essentially create a comprehensive view of all of your high priority security alerts, as well as compliance status across all of your AWS accounts. Security Hub also gives you a single pane of glass to aggregate, organize, as well as prioritize all of your security alerts or findings, as it's called in the portal, from multiple AWS services, right? So some of the services supported are GuardDuty and Macie, but we also support third-party vendors, which I'll touch upon briefly. Now, you can also continuously monitor your environment using automated compliance checks based on the AWS best practices as well as industry standards such as the CIS AWS Foundation's benchmark. So definitely a service that you should check out. And then one last service I want to talk to you about is Amazon Macie. Now, with Amazon Macie, you can start to leverage machine learning and pattern matching to discover as well as protect all of your sensitive data in the cloud. With Amazon Macie, you can start to create an automatic inventory of all of your Amazon S3 buckets, including those buckets that may be shared with other AWS accounts outside your AWS organization. And once all of this is set up and inventory is ready, you can start to create alerts and receive alerts of any sensitive or vulnerable information that may exist within those buckets. Now, let's take a closer look at Amazon Macie as well as AWS Security Hub. Now, when you look at Amazon Macie, it is a fully managed data security and privacy service that will enable you to easily discover and protect all of your sensitive data. And when you look at the problem statement here, right, as organizations manage growing volumes of data in their environments, it's obviously a lot more complex and difficult to identify and protect all of their sensitive data at scale. With Amazon Macie, you can really start to automate the discovery of all of this sensitive data at scale and lower the cost of protecting your data. Now, the way Macie does this is it provides an inventory of all the Amazon S3 buckets, including a list of unencrypted buckets, any buckets that may be publicly accessible, or buckets shared with AWS accounts outside those that you have defined in AWS organizations. Once this is done, Macie will start to apply machine learning and pattern matching techniques to the buckets that you select to identify and alert you of any sensitive data, such as personally identifiable information. Now, Macie's alerts or findings can be searched and filtered in the AWS Management Console and sent to Amazon CloudWatch events for easy integration with existing workflow or event management systems such as AWS step functions, or if you want to take automated actions, you can use AWS Lambda as well. Now, this can really start to help you in various use cases, including when you want to meet regulatory requirements such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which is HIPAA. You can also look at things like General Data Privacy Regulation or GDPR acts and start to work towards achieving that using Macie. Now, one quick note I want to make sure I touch upon with regards to Macie is that Macie now has a number of new capabilities that we recently launched, including updated machine learning models, which will help you with more accurate detection of PII or personally identifiable information, support for customer-defined data types for proprietary or any unique sensitive data that you may have. It now supports the entire API coverage with respect to actions that you can take on Macie. And then finally, one of the more popular features that were requested was native multi-account management with AWS organizations. So definitely a service that has been enhanced quite a bit over this year, and definitely something that you should leverage if you're looking to really step up your security posture. Now, another service that I briefly touched upon previously was AWS Security Hub, and how Security Hub can help you centralize and have a central place where you can see all of your security alerts, right? So we spoke about Macie, and all of the findings from Macie can then be sent to Security Hub, but that's not the only source. We have other native AWS services like Amazon Detective or Amazon Inspector or Guard Duty that can send its findings to Security Hub, but also third-party services that are available on AWS Marketplace that can start to integrate with Security Hub to give you a comprehensive view of the security findings in your environment. So in the diagram that you see, you can see data sources that I mentioned that feed directly into our AWS Security Hub. And one of the examples is Trend Micro from a third-party perspective. And once all of these findings are collected and forwarded to Security Hub, you can start to take actions on all of these findings automatically or even semi-automatically using Amazon CloudWatch events. Now, this action could take the form of a deeper investigation in your SIM, or if it's a known bad threat, you can start to take automated steps to respond to it through your SOAR platform. You can also use a solution to open a ticket for another group to take action based on the findings that you see here. So a lot of options once you start to centralize all of your findings in Security Hub. So the one thing I want to make sure you take away from this is the more integrations you have means the more questions you can ask and eventually answer them. And this is really a boon for all of the security analysts in your environment, as it allows them to better understand their AWS environment. Now, let's talk about one particular seller on AWS Marketplace in Trend Micro and how customers are leveraging Trend Micro as part of their cloud security posture management strategy, and eventually really enhancing visibility as well as control over all of their sensitive assets to strengthen their security foothold in the cloud. Now, with Trend Micro's Cloud One conformity solution, you can start to centrally manage and monitor all of the misconfigurations of your resources within your AWS environment. Now, conformity is held up by its knowledge base, which uses over 600 step-by-step rules based on the AWS well-architected framework, if you've heard of it, which is, again, designed by AWS Solutions Architects, and can help you deliver misconfiguration reports with actionable remediation steps. So, it'll tell you exactly how you can get a resolution for any security issues that you may have. Now, this really allows you to ensure that your configuration and compliance requirements hold up as you scale workloads and increase commitment to all of your cloud infrastructure. Now, with this product, it also enables you to centralize all of the discovery of misconfiguration, your policy management in your environment, as well as reporting in one single pane of glass. The solution has dashboards that can start to provide you with actionable insights, as I mentioned, that help with detection as well as the response of any incidents that may occur in your environment. Another thing that I want to touch upon is conformity performs continuous compliance checks, right? So it's not a one-time thing. It continuously performs these checks against best practices to ensure your security posture is upheld without the need for manual tasks or upkeep. And really, at the end, it provides assurance that your infrastructure is configured and deployed securely from the starting stage of build pipeline to runtime. Now, to put this into a real-world example, let's look at a Trend Micro Cloud One conformity customer success story with Change Healthcare. Now, for those of you who don't know, Change Healthcare is an independent healthcare technology company that provides data as well as analytics-driven solutions to improve clinical, financial, as well as patient engagement outcomes in the US healthcare system. Now, they have an artificial intelligence team within their environment that uses large volumes of sensitive data. And really, that team chose Trend Micro's Cloud One conformity solution to help them enforce specific policies for security, as well as governance and compliance requirements, such as HIPAA, since they work in the healthcare space. And really, since implementing conformity, Change Healthcare can now simplify the configuration and deployment of their internal security rules, such as encryption, and also enables the team to quickly and confidently adopt new AWS services while maintaining compliance. It really even automates compliance with stringent healthcare regulations, which has been a great win for this customer. Now, I'm going to discuss a couple of more customer success stories from AWS Marketplace sellers that show how other customers and solutions were able to successfully set up their AWS environments to protect their sensitive assets. And really, the goal here is to give you options and show you that with AWS Marketplace, you can really look at a variety of solutions and then based on your requirements, select a particular solution that may fit your needs. Now, we'll first dive into one solution with Check Point, who many of you may know as Dome9. And they have a customer called Xero that provides a global accounting platform for small businesses as well as their advisors. And they needed to migrate to a public cloud environment without compromising security. Now, one of the things that they needed to do was, in addition to scaling to support millions of new customers, they also wanted to defend effectively against evolving cyber threats while maintaining agility in their environment. They also needed to support internationally recognized security standards. So, the new infrastructure that they were looking at needed to be secure by design. And the Xero's team initially worked closely with Check Point to implement security pretty much at every level of their infrastructure stack and started to deploy 130 Check Point gateways across 100 different AWS accounts that were running this product called Check Point CloudGuard in their environment. And really the goal was to keep their data and assets safe from threats. Now, they use a transit VPC style architecture to deploy CloudGuard, and this really enabled traffic to be directed to a defined security zone for security scrubbing based on any number of attributes, including regulatory requirements, policy, type of traffic, and other requirements, right? So it really started to help definitely with the networking piece of it. Now, micro-segmentation capabilities also enable Xero to secure east-west data traffic as well as traditional north-south traffic flows. Now, with all of this, they were able to securely move 700,000 customers, and these are some big numbers here, right? And out of these numbers, like some of the more important ones are the fact that they were able to move 59 billion records along with 1 trillion worth of transactions to a fully managed AWS environments in just 9 months. Now, they also transformed their company security culture, which is quite important across security engineering, as well as DevOps, and because of the partnerships by automating security within their environment. And then finally, one more customer success story that I want to touch upon is with Digital Guardian and their customer Jabil. Now, Jabil is an electronics manufacturing company. They have 90 plants in 23 countries and quite a lot of employees, with close to 180,000 employees who all have workstations, and these workstations, come up to 52,000 workstations in the environment. So a decently sized environment there. Now, Jabil's small security team was constantly under pressure by senior management to mature their security program, and really with over 175,000 endpoints, they needed to have a concrete security system to ensure its sensitive data to secure its sensitive data from both internal as well as external threats. Now, should a security breach leak any customer intellectual property and violate NDAs, Jabil would start to risk significant financial penalties. And they also had valuable IP of their own, such as pricing deals from suppliers that they needed to protect. Now, previously, they had tried to implement data loss prevention programs without much success, and that's why this time they engaged Digital Guardian for a POC where they successfully test deployed 3,000 agents, right? And once this POC was complete successfully, they then moved on to deploy 49,000 agents worldwide in less than 90 days from their initial engagement. And really, once fully deployed, they gained visibility into all data access and usage across all of their 52,000 workstations. This really allowed them to immediately identify data that was being copied to USB drives more commonly than expected. And really, external storage devices that were required to now be registered and sensitive files be encrypted, which form the core of the security strategy. They were also able to identify and locate critical IP as defined by each business unit and its customers. And then finally, Jabil also gained the ability to implement more secure data workflows, including real-time user prompts at the point of risk. So really cool use case there with Digital Guardian with their customer Jabil. Now, we spoke about a number of solution sellers in AWS Marketplace. So it really makes sense to touch upon what AWS Marketplace is and how it can help you. So AWS Marketplace was really built to help reduce friction of deploying software into your environment. And essentially, it's a digital software catalog that has cloudified how to procure and license software on AWS. For example, if you're looking for a security solution, you can now use AWS Marketplace to find multiple solutions to fit your needs. And we've also simplified deployment, right? So a lot of products are available as software as a service, where you don't have anything to deploy. You can purchase third-party software through AWS, and really all of this software will start to appear consolidated on your AWS bill. So you don't have to chase different suppliers with different bills. All of your bills would now start to show up on your AWS billing dashboard. And one of the cool things that we were able to do was to enable software to be bought in a more cloud-like way, right? So if you're buying a security solution, you're typically buying a license for a year in your traditional environments. But if you're operating on the cloud and working in an elastic environment where you need to scale up and down based on demand, you definitely need to have flexibility. So with AWS Marketplace, we now provide software that you can pay for by the hour, and you really don't have to overpay and buy license for your peak. So really, there's a trade-off in costs, but in general, if you're working in an elastic environment, you should definitely see savings. And last but best, we also have a team of solutions architects that help you support your POCs and your implementations and help you understand which products may be best for you. So definitely reach out to the AWS Marketplace Solutions Architects team if you're looking for more information there. Now, there's a variety of solutions in AWS Marketplace, and specifically, there's a variety of security solutions available. along with that, there's also a wide variety of pricing options that fit your specific needs, right? So when you look at the different pricing options that are available, you can start off by looking at multiple software solution providers and look at free trial options so that you can really see if these solutions work for you. And as you start to increase usage in an elastic environment, you can also have an option to pay as you go if it's an extremely elastic environment. And then once you determine that the software may be used for a longer period and you understand the consumption patterns, you can start to look at our monthly, annual, or even multi-year options for significant savings. Now, from a deployment standpoint, we also help provide multiple deployment options such as software as a service, Amazon machine images, CloudFormation templates, as well as container services such as ECS and EKS to really help delight your builders with respect to the options that they can have. And really, to summarize, there's a lot of great solutions out there to help you protect your sensitive assets. And Trend Micro, as an example, should be considered as a part of your toolkit while building out your architecture. Now, there's a plethora of security products available out there, and really one of the key points that I want to make is definitely go out there and try out a few solutions, since we have free trials in Marketplace. And some of the solution sellers we've highlighted today are Trend Micro, Check Point, as well as Digital Guardian. But there are also others, right? So you can really get to see a wide variety of options available. And then based on your unique environment, you can start to implement some of these solutions as your usage kind of scales. So if you're looking for old tools that may exist in your environment and want to bring them over, we also support bring your own license so that you can just bring your existing software in, or you can look at software that may be more intimate to the cloud, and some of them we highlighted today, and start to use software in a more cloud-like way as well. And then last but not least, you can always ask your AWS solutions architect on how you might best integrate some of these tools and processes to improve your security, as well as establish your security strategy across your entire organization's AWS environment. So thank you very much for hanging out with us today and really going through the different AWS Marketplace solutions that you can leverage to really enhance your security posture.